Welcome back to part 3 of how to play Warhammer 40k 9th edition. In the last video we went over command points, stratagems, strategic reserves, and got into the battle round covering the command phase. In this video we will cover what many believe to be the most important of the phases, the movement phase. Because of the many intricacies, this part will cover how movement is executed, the different movement activations, and reinforcements. The movement phase is broken down into two parts: move units, where movement activations are made, and once all desired units have made their move activations, it is time for the reinforcement step. Naturally, we will cover the moving unit step first. Before covering the different types of movement activations, I will first go over how the movement of models is executed. Whenever you move a unit, you can choose not to move some models in the unit. Whenever you move a model, you can pivot it, but no part of the model's base or hull can move across the bases or hulls of other models. Think of it like collision in a video game. Unless specified from an ability, models can't move through another model's collision volume. So when you move your models, make sure to keep the presence of other models in mind. This also applies to the battlefield edge. Models, bases, or hulls cannot overhang beyond the edge of the battlefield. And a unit must always finish any type of move in unit coherency. If it's not possible, then that move is not considered valid and cannot be made. None of the activations made in the movement phase enable units the ability to move within or end their movement activation within engagement range of enemy units. Always ensure any movement made in the movement phase is outside of the 1-inch horizontal and 5-inch vertical engagement range. And you are free to rotate any movable parts of the model, such as sponsons or turrets, when models move, which is an important factor to keep in mind when it comes to measuring movement. The core rules state that the distance a model moves is measured using the parts of the model's base or hull that moves the furthest along its path, including parts that rotate or pivot. This is fairly simple to keep track of for models with round bases. As you can see here, this captain moved more than the specified 6-inch limit. Because of their round bases, as long as you keep the reference points consistent when measuring from start to end positions, models with round bases can be measured accurately, regardless of the pivots made. Where things get more squirrely is when moving models with oval bases, or ones which are measured from their hulls. Linear movement is easy enough to measure, if we keep the reference points the same. But if a pivot takes place, you need to be mindful of its impact. Since movement is measured using the point which moves the furthest, our origin point is no longer valid. In the case of this repulsor, this corner now becomes the point which moved the furthest. The first of the movement actions available to a unit is the normal move. Simply, following the rules mentioned previously, models are able to move a distance up to, but no greater than, their movement characteristic. The Redemptor Dreadnought has a variable movement characteristic, which degrades as it suffers damage. Assuming it's at full wounds, it can move a total of 8 inches. Advancing is the second type of movement action. It is done by rolling a d6 and adding the result to your movement characteristic. Should this Redemptor advance, a d6 is rolled. Adding the result to its movement stat, the total is 11, and the Redemptor can move up to that amount in inches, which is an improvement relative to his normal move. However, the boosted movement that comes from advancing does come at a price. When a unit advances, it loses the ability to charge and get into melee combat this turn. It also gives up shooting with ranged weapons, with the exception of weapons of the assault type, which are fired at a -1 to hit penalty. Also keep in mind, advancing units still cannot move within engagement range of enemy models. So why would you want to advance? It may be possible that your unit benefits from a special ability that gets around the previously mentioned limitations. Such would be the case with these Demonettes, who can advance and charge when in range of the Herald. But suppose it doesn't, which often can be the case. You may be in a scenario to have that unit control a vital objective. In such cases, you may deem that scoring potential is worth more than having that unit shoot. Remaining stationary means that none of the models in the unit move this movement phase. Sometimes units are just where they want to be, or they may be wielding weapons or have abilities that benefit from remaining stationary, such is the case with this aggressor squad, who have the ability to fire twice if they remain stationary. Falling back is the last of the movement actions, and is only available to units in engagement range of enemy models. It works just like the normal move. Units can move a distance up to their movement characteristic. Typically, units which fall back cannot manifest powers in the subsequent psychic phase, shoot in the subsequent shooting phase, and declare charges in the subsequent charge phase. In most cases, units use the fallback activation to disengage. The unit which fell back was in a sense tied up. Those intercessors' options were limited, and as you will see when we get to the shooting phase, those Demonettes were not a valid target for shooting attacks fired from the Redemptor Dreadnought. In such a scenario, sacrificing these intercessors' subsequent actions allows greater freedom in dealing with these demonettes. And as mentioned previously, units which fall back cannot end their fallback move within engagement range of enemy models. If it can't do so, then it cannot perform the fallback action. For instance, if instead there was also a unit of Seekers engaged with the intercessors like so, the intercessors are in effect locked in combat, unable to fall back, as they cannot be moved across other models. But this is an excellent opportunity to go over the second of the core stratagems introduced in 9th edition, Desperate Breakout. For 2 command points used on a unit within engagement range, it allows a unit to attempt to fall back and be moved across enemy models as if they were not there. However, first the controlling player must roll a d6 for each model in the unit. For each roll of 1, one model selected by the controlling player is destroyed. Once the fallback move is performed, any model that ends their fallback within engagement range of an enemy model is destroyed, and this unit cannot do anything else this turn in the psychic, shooting, or charge phases, even if it had an ability that would allow it to fall back and shoot, or fall back and charge. Even with these restrictions and its cost, it's a very powerful stratagem. Returning to our example, it takes what was previously a scenario where the intercessors had no options, stuck in a bad position, and now provides them one, albeit at the cost of command points and some potential casualties. But that's not all. There may be some offensive applications to Desperate Breakout as well. Here the Slaanesh Seekers are in engagement range with these intercessors who are barring their path to this objective. In this scenario, neither group is wrapped and both are free to fall back. But nothing is stopping these Seekers of Slaanesh to leverage their high movement characteristic of 14 inches in combination with Desperate Breakout to fall back and through, gaining control of the objective. Terrain has its own subset of rules which impact the way models interact with it. For the purpose of this series, it's largely inconsequential, since the focus is on understanding the core mechanics of how games are played. In general terms, models cannot move through terrain, only over them, unless otherwise specified. The example used in the core rules is models can't move through a wall, but can climb over it. Firstly, we should establish that models can move freely over terrain features 1 inch or less in height. This is often the case with scatter-style terrain. For terrain which is larger than 1 inch, models can climb up and down them, taking vertical distance into account of its movement distance. This captain can move 6 inches. He can move 1 inch towards the container, which is about 2.5 inches tall, and he will move another 1 inch to reach his destination on top of the terrain feature, within his movement capacity. Models cannot finish their move mid-climb. If it's not possible to do so, that move is not valid and cannot be made. Meaning, if this captain does not have the movement to reach the top of this ruin, he can't just float here. In such cases, one may consider advancing as a way to get that extra distance. And with that, we have covered the basic actions and rules of the move unit step of the movement phase. Once all of your units have made their move activations, it's time for the reinforcement step. In the reinforcement step, you can set up any units which have been deployed off the battlefield, whether they are in strategic reserves or if they have their own reserve rules. In either case, set up the arriving units one at a time, following the rules that pertain to how those units should arrive. An important note is that units can only arrive after the first battle round. For example, this Inceptor squad has an ability on its datasheet which specifies it may deploy off the battlefield, allowing it to arrive in the reinforcement step. The ability specifies it can arrive anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 9 inches away from any enemy models. Once you have set up all the units you desire to have arrive from reserves, it's time to leave the movement phase. And that brings this video to its end, and brought us to a place where the fundamentals of the movement phase have been established. In the next part, we will cover what I would qualify as the advanced or special interactions of the movement phase. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, give it a like, and if you want to help this channel grow, please subscribe. And with that, I'll hope to see you guys in the next one.